Okay, hold on. Let me make sure that I'm heard. Okay. I'm sick of dealing with Zoom. Hopefully this is the last time that I have to time this. Okay, time start now. Hello and welcome to my presentation. I'm just going to get into it. Introduction. The main question that they set out to answer is how do deadlines and multiple competing goals affect motivational conflict and motivational conflict intensity? When we are talking about motivational conflict, we are talking about the feeling of as though we should be doing something else. We should be doing an alternative activity. And they broke it down further into how does the element of a deadline affect motivational conflict? How do competing goals affect motivational conflict? And then lastly, how do time and multiple goals work together to affect motivational conflict? Oh my God. All right. Methods. They ended up using 134 students, first semester law students from a German university, and they used an experience sampling software that was downloaded on smartphones. And for 1 week, a period of 7 days, participants were asked not 6 questions. They were asked to answer questions 6 times per day in a 12-hour window at random times. And the questions that they were sent, the first one was something regarding like, what's your main activity? What are you pursuing right now, right? The second one was, what is your alternative activity? So what could you be doing? What's the strongest thing interfering with your main activity? And then there was a statement that said, I feel that I should be doing this alternative activity rather than the main activity. And then the students agreed with that on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 meaning no and 2 through 5 meaning yes. And then 2 through 5 were then gauged on a scale of 1 to 4 to gauge intensity. Okay, so for the sake of this presentation, I got rid of the entire third set of hypotheses. I'll get into that later. So the first hypothesis is just one singular one. This said that the probability of study activities increases when an exam gets closer in time. This is retained, and this is pretty obvious. Why? Habits increased about 14% with each day that the exam got closer. Hypothesis 2A stated that the probability of motivational conflicts is lower the closer an exam is in time. This is also retained, so as time goes on, people tend to feel more confident, or the participants tended to feel more confident that they were doing the correct activity, that their main activity was the correct one. Hypothesis 2B predicted that the probability of motivational conflicts is lower for study activities compared to non-study activities. A little bit weird of a figure, but when students were not studying, the probability of a motivational conflict increased by 217.7%. So that was retained as well. H2C is probably the most important one out of all of these, and I'll get to why. The probability of motivational conflicts is lower for study activities the closer an exam is in time. So H2A concluded that the probability of motivational conflicts overall decreased, but this was actually especially true for non-study activities. So they ended up rejecting H2C. And I'll get into that later. This is very interesting because students were still confident that they were doing what they should be doing, even when that activity wasn't studying as the exam got closer. So for limitations, the third set of hypotheses, they were very confusing, very complicated. And overall, I think they were just trying to answer too much with one big lump of data. It wasn't specific enough. And I honestly think that they should do a second follow-up study for those ones. There was some confusing language in there, although I do believe the initial results were published in German, so there might be some confusion coming from the translation of things. They had a very small and specific sample population, as well as a short research window, but for what they got, I think they did a pretty good job of their findings. They were useful and pretty sophisticated. Okay, so now for future research. Let's do a refresher. So H2C. people or students rather were still confident that they were doing what they should be doing, even when they weren't studying, even as the exam got closer in time. Usually we associate college students with getting really anxious if they're not studying before an exam. But these students showed the exact opposite. And our researchers found three possible explanations. The first one was self-care. So even though they weren't study related, these activities still helped the students prepare for the upcoming test, calming nerves, maybe focusing their attention, doing stuff like that, puzzles, brain games, if you will. The second one was obligations. So students doing things that they absolutely needed to do, even though it wasn't studying, they needed to do these things. So they didn't feel that they needed to study. And then the third one is simply sufficient studying. They studied enough and they felt that they didn't need to study anymore. And the reason that I want future research done in this is because this could show students, not only at this German university, right, but everywhere, how to employ self-regulation in their study habits. Maybe don't cram it in all at the end. Maybe don't preemptively study way before a test and then not touch it. Employing some self-regulation and study habits would show how to understand when you've done a sufficient amount of studying and when to switch over into a more calming, resting exercise. Because at the end of the day, that's how you not only learn for a test, but that's how you learn best for life. That's how you learn any skill, is to take rest and to employ some self-regulation. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thanks for watching, even though I know you had to.